All right. Well, my name is Nick Voss. I'm Education Outreach Coordinator here at VLAWMO, and this is the Lambert Pond and Creek info session. We're excited you're here. We're really glad to connect in a time where it's difficult to do so, and we're also just sorry that it's such a nice evening out, and we scheduled this on a nice evening, but thanks for being here anyway. We'll make the best of it. Here's the agenda for what we're going to cover. I'm going to go over the logistics for how the webinar itself works, and then we have a welcome message from our new administrator, Phil. We'll hear from the City of Vadnais Heights, and then we'll cover a background for the project. We'll hear about the engineering components, and then I will connect back with a connected vision for the watershed and how this project connects to many other properties and areas that we work with. We'll have the Q&A panel with 15 to 20 minutes, and then a thank you and resources for next steps. So getting started with the housekeeping, just some details so everyone knows how we're gonna facilitate. We have everyone on mute to limit background noise, just in case there's a dog barking or a vacuum, you know, that kind of happens in our webinar format. I encourage everyone to put video off, and with lots of people on, that'll make it less glitchy so that the presenters and slides will just be more reliable. We have a few different views in the Zoom options. This is the way Zoom coordinates its program, but you'll see the speaker view if you toggle through those options with how to view different screens. The speaker view is most efficient to just see who's talking and the slides. Next, the webinar, we will have it recorded. It's recording right now, and we will post it on the Lambert Lake Meander webpage. So you can get to that two different ways with those two links on VLAWMO.org. Lastly, the chat box is available for questions and comments. I'm going to be moderating the chat box, trying to collect all the questions, and I will field those to our panelists. It's just the most efficient way, because we have a set time to work with, to field the questions, but that does not mean that we're trying to limit dialogue at all. So we'll have a follow-up for questions at the end. Who's on the call? Who are our panelists? We have Phil Belfiori, our new VLAWMO administrator. We have Jesse Farrell, the City of Vadnais Heights engineer. I introduced myself as Education Outreach Coordinator. Don Tanner is the Program Development Coordinator at VLAWMO, and our partners with SEH, Emily Jennings and Jeremy Walgrave. With that, I will hand it over to Phil.
All right, thank you so much, Nick. I wanted to introduce myself again to everyone on the chat. I am Phil Belfiori. I'm the new VLAWMO administrator. I'm so pleased to be working with such a great group of people and great board and a wonderful watershed with great resources. I wanted to also introduce a board member who is in attendance, Patricia Euchre, who's a council member for the city, is also a board member at VLAWMO, and I wanted to welcome her and thank her for her leadership. I'm really looking forward to working on this and many other partnership-based projects in this watershed. This is a great example. This project you're gonna hear from tonight is a great example of a regional multi-purpose project that can both protect the creek from a water quality standpoint, protect the downstream lakes, and very importantly, provide critical storage and flood control potential for the creek and the ditch as well. So it's multi-purpose in nature. And most importantly, the key word in this slide is listen. On behalf of the board and everybody here, we want to hear from you about this project. Any ideas and thoughts and questions that you have is the most important part of this entire project. Hearing from the stakeholders and residents is critical. We really wanted to thank you for your attendance tonight. We know your time is limited and it's beautiful out, and thank you so much. Next slide, please. All right, we just wanted to highlight quickly how we got the word out for this event. We sent postcards, hopefully you all got one, to both nearby and downstream landowners. 67 of them went out. We also published this in an advertisement in the press, and also the EQB, Environmental Quality Board Monitor, which went out a few days ago, as well as the Environmental Assessment Worksheet Notice at the Vadnais Height and White Bear Lake Press came out today. We also put it on our VLAWMO website, our calendar, and our Facebook post. Next slide. Okay, just a couple of slides about what the VLAWMO is. VLAWMO stands for Vadnais Lake Area Water Management Organization. If you haven't heard about that organization, it was established over 40 years ago in 1983, about 40 years ago. Includes 6 communities: Vadnais Heights, where this project is located, also the cities of White Bear Lake, Gem Lake, North Oaks, and Lino Lakes, as well as White Bear Township. We have a 6-member board of directors, one representing each one of those communities. It covers 24 square miles, and it has lots of very high quality water bodies and important streams, and lots of critical areas that we need to manage with our member communities that I mentioned earlier. Next slide. Some of the core activities that VLAWMO is involved with its partners is flood management and storage, monitoring and analysis of our lakes, streams, and wetlands, program management and projects, pursuing grants and working with homeowners on various projects and programs, education and outreach, including schools and workshops, and also manages the Wetland Conservation Act within the 24 square mile area. Next. A couple slides on just introducing Lambert Creek. The VLAWMO board sees Lambert Creek as a critical priority water body within the watershed. And they are continuing to try to find areas to pursue multi-purpose and partnership-based maintenance operations and storage and water management and water quality projects and programs within Lambert Creek. 4 critical priorities that we will continue to pursue, including with this project, is to identify and partner on pond projects to store the water and filter the nutrients and make sure that that sediment is deposited where it's designed to go. Also to clear tree removal and brush out of the drainage systems and the streams. Also water control structures called weirs, which you'll hear about tonight, to store water in the right place and meter out the water downstream so it doesn't cause additional problems downstream. And also critical research and monitoring, both from a habitat and water quality standpoint. You can see about all these programs within Lambert Creek on our website at that link below. Next slide, please. I really want to help identify the partners of this project, and nothing we can do at VLAWMO can be successful without our critical partners, including the City of Vadnais Heights, who you're going to hear from Jesse in just a minute, as well as SEH, our engineer, the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency and Environmental Protection Agency, and the University of Minnesota. We couldn't do our work, and this project could not happen without these great partners. And speaking of that, Jesse Farrell, who's the Public Works Director and City Engineer for the City of Vadnais Heights, is an outstanding partner of ours, and we thank him very much for presenting tonight. Thanks, Jesse.
Thanks. Thank you, Phil. Thank you, everyone, for joining. It looks like people are still trickling in. Nick must be letting them in. I think we need to go to the next slide here. So we're honored to be a partner in this project. The city and VLAWMO, we work under the same roof. We're all headquartered at Vadnais Heights City Hall, and it's really helpful that we see each other every day and we get that synergy of, well, not really right now when people are working remotely, but it's really nice. Well, so I've been with the city now for a few years, and a big item of public interest has just been water and drainage, and most of the city of Vadnais Heights ends up draining to Lambert Creek, and some people know that as County Ditch number 14, and then there's a number of branches that feed into that ditch. So if you live in Vadnais Heights, there's a good chance when water leaves your front yard or your driveway or your gutter, eventually it's going to make it into a branch, and eventually it's going to make it into Lambert Creek, and that's why we're real excited about this project. We're also, we find areas related to the Lambert Lake project that can increase improvement to the system. And like I said, lots of branches tie into this ditch. And it'd be great if we could do every project at once. But the reality is that we need to pick the right project at the right time. And with some of the things that SEH and other participants will explain better than I can, this project rose to the top, and we're all really excited about it. And then lastly, collaborating on projects and sharing resources. Again, because we see each other every day, every morning, we eat lunch together, there's just built-in synergy between the city of Vadnais and VLAWMO, and that's something that happens organically, and it's very good for both organizations and our customers. If you go to the next slide. Thanks. So again, looking at Lambert Creek, ditch 14 and all the branch ditches, that's been an item of ongoing interest. It seems like every day this week, I'm visiting people on their property, and we're talking about the challenges that people are dealing with all the water that we've had. 2019, the wettest year in Minnesota's recorded history. And, I just can't say that enough. It's a challenge. It's also an opportunity where we can look at, okay, how can we improve our system? How can we improve functions? And one example that came up this spring was some repairs we did at the Oak Creek Drive box culvert. It's got a lot of interest on the public. We have a webpage on the City of Vadnais Heights site that people can look at, and we should link something to VLAWMO too. Dawn Tanner, who I believe will be speaking later, I didn't give her any notice. I just said, hey, can you help us with this? And next thing you know, we're picking out seeds and native plants and looking at the site. And, we're a very lean staff, but we're nimble enough where we can do things like that for one another. Of course, you do one project. The next thing you do, before you're done with one, is you start looking at what's next. And, there is a lot of vegetation management associated with this ditch. And that's probably another project that we'll do in the future. But yeah, there's a never-ending amount of work. And then just with every ditch, there's sediment and debris that needs to be removed. It seems harmless when people, dump their leaves, their back of their yards or, into low areas, but it all adds up. And, we spent, almost $100,000 removing sediment at this box culvert. And so there's a price to pay. And so, we're all working together, educating residents, and just that those activities have a cost. And I think I have one more slide, right, Nick? Yeah, and there's a photo there. If you can see it, there's, the project. It's a little closer to completion. Lots of times when people build things, they don't think about how do you maintain them. And so what you see there and some of the things you don't see are, we built in access to this project. And so eventually it'll blend in better than it looks right now. But, real thoughtfully selected shrubs and native seed mixes. And then there's also a maintenance component where even beneath some of the surface, there's aggregate we left in place. So the next time we got to get a backhoe down there, we'll have a way to get down there. Yeah, and I think this might be my last slide here. I'm not quite sure, but that's all right. So through here, what you're looking at here is some of the sheet pile along the edge of where we're doing a project here. That's the photo. So just between the grasses and the water you see there, it looks subtle, but that's a sheet pile there, and you can see how it's leaned over, and eventually that would slough off into this water quality feature. And so some of this property is private property that's encumbered with, a ditch easement. And then some of it is, the city of Vadnais Heights, we have a parcel through here. And then, just talking about this project a little bit, you could see where access is intended to come off of County Road F. And then you can see where the sheet pile is getting replaced, that pink line. And then the photo and what you're seeing in the plan view there, it's, shaped like a triangle. That's a stormwater retention basin. And what that will do is slow the stream down to a crawl in those locations. And that allows some of that sediment to settle out. And when sediment settles out there, it's not settling out in other places. And so Phil mentioned earlier, we want to take that sediment out at the right place at the right time. And this project is really going to enhance and maintain that ability to drop the sediment out there, improve the water quality, improve flood storage. Really excited. And I won't get into the details, but you can see down along the side there that squiggly line. That's the proposed meander. And I'll let Emily and Jeremy get into the details of that. But what that's doing is it's replacing an existing ditch. And you'll see there's an old county ditch and a soon-to-be old county ditch, and then we'll have the new proposed meander. And then just tying off to that, real faintly, you can see branch ditch number 3. That extends up to County Road F and underneath F, and then to the wetlands to the north. And that's another future project that we'll be interested in addressing. I think I've talked enough. Do you want to go to the next slide?
Actually, Nick, if you want to go back to the one right before that.
Oh, yeah.
Hi,
Thank you, Dawn.
everybody. I'm Dawn Tanner. Thank you, Jesse. That was a great introduction, and working on the Oak Creek Drive project was really fun. I'm looking forward to doing more projects like that and watching that one continue to grow and develop. I have a little bit longer delay on the slides, so I'll just pause a bit if I need to while I'm waiting for something, and just wanted to let you all know that. But as we look, this is drone imagery that was provided by SEH that allows us to see the full site of Lambert Lake. Lambert Lake is a historical lake that is now primarily a wetland area, and it includes Lambert Pond. So sometimes we colloquially use those terms interchangeably, but the pond refers to the stormwater retention basin that you see at the top right of this image. And then you can also see the path of the meander that's provided here that's winding in between the two, what will be previous ditch lines. So this just provides a really nice overview of the project and gives you a chance to see it in context. Next slide, please. There's an image here that shows more of the watershed, and you'll be able to see more detail on that in just a moment. But I wanted to bring back the watershed map and take a moment to just look at that so that everybody is aware of where Lambert Creek or Ditch 14 winds. Of course, those refer to the same body of water. And it starts at East Goose Lake. That's the headwaters. East and West Goose there flow into Lambert Creek. Those lakes are both impaired for nutrients. It flows into Lambert Creek, which is impaired for bacteria. I'll talk about that more in a moment. But then through Rice, Grass, and Lambert, we call them lakes, but they're large wetland complexes now that have the ability to treat the water as it's flowing into East Vadnais Lake. East Vadnais Lake is the reservoir for drinking water for the water utility, St. Paul Regional Water Services. And the water quality in East Vadnais Lake is very high quality, but it's also a concern of ours and a reason we want to be working on the creek, because we have existing impairments for bacteria and for nutrients. And we want to do our best to try to keep those pollutants from reaching the drinking water reservoir. Next slide. Like I said, I have a little bit longer pause, so I'm going to assume that you're seeing the next slide, and it will get to me in just a moment. But there's an image from Google Earth, and it shows our project area. There's a red square that focuses in on Lambert Pond, and if you advance and add a shape here, we've got a circle that shows the historical lake area. So that's Lambert Lake. The whole area is what we're looking at as we look at this project. And as we started talking about this project, it really started with a maintenance need for flood control. And we thought, how can we look at this whole site to do the best job for the environment, to think about the pollutants that are getting into these water bodies, to be able to remove them and really address everything that's going on in that system. Next slide. Are you on photos of the sheet pile, Nick?
Yep, it's
there.
there.
We go. Okay,
Sorry,
now I
the
can see
delay.
it. So we began to visit the site by looking at the sheet pile. Sorry? Okay. And that was our concern. We could see this bowing into Lambert Pond. We could also see signs of upward movement on the vinyl sheet pile itself from the freeze thaw cycle, and you can see that in the photos on this page. The vinyl sheet pile, when it was originally installed, this was part of a project in 2004 that was building the stormwater retention pond, putting steel sheet pile on the south side of the pond and vinyl sheet pile on the north side. And that vinyl had a lifespan of 10 to 15 years. So we knew that it would need to be repaired or replaced eventually. And that was our concern that got us out to the site to figure out what would be the next best thing to do to work on this site. So we began by meeting with a local excavator and asking for advice about how we could, what our time frame would be to look at repair or replacement for the sheet pile. And he used his expert judgment to give us an idea, a rough idea, but said that he thought we had a couple of years before we would need to do repair or replacement on this sheet pile. So we started working on our project and working on funding. We prepared our application to MPCA, and that was for a loan for the sheet pile portion, because grant funds can't be used for maintenance for most grants, and that was true for the grant that we were applying to. So we looked at a loan for the maintenance portion, and then we applied for grant funds to do the other portions of the project, which includes building the Meander and adding some biochar treatment cells that I'll talk about in a little bit to be able to remove bacteria. As we continued working on the project, we got our application in and we found out that it was selected for funding. So we began working closely with SEH at that time to figure out exactly what the design and the dynamics required for that sheet pile would need to be. Next slide. Resistivity study was done first to help determine what would be required for sheet pile, and Emily and Jeremy will talk about this more in a little bit, but I'm just introducing it here. That involved passing electrical current through the ground to be able to find the depth of solid substrate where the sheet pile would need to be anchored. And that kind of technology wasn't readily available in 2004 when the vinyl sheet pile was originally installed. So this was new technology that we were able to apply at this site to be able to determine what the appropriate depth would need to be to have long-lasting sheet pile on the north end of the pond. And this was determined to be up to 32 feet in some places. So for that, we needed to take into consideration what was there for the existing sheet pile and look at what would really be required, if replacement would be required or if repair could possibly be part of that solution. Next slide. That information allowed SEH to design the depth of sheet pile along the entire wall. And as part of that, then I already mentioned the 32-foot depth that was required in some places, but that helped us to determine that repair or even trying to be able to salvage parts of the vinyl sheet pile and reuse them in some places really wasn't a viable possibility, both because of the condition of the sheet pile now and because of the total length that was installed originally. So the best value and the longest lasting option at that point was determined to be full replacement with steel sheet pile on the north end. And we expect that to hold up like it has on the south end and last for many, many years and even decades. So as we look at the sheet pile replacement, the major contribution here is flood control. If that sheet pile, the vinyl sheet pile that's in place now, was allowed to fail, we would have flooding events that would be a direct result. So we knew we needed to take care of that. The cost for the materials is estimated at about $550,000, and that is being provided by a 0% interest Clean Water Fund loan from the MPCA. We were able to secure that as part of in relation to the grant funds and the grant portion of the project, which I'll explain coming up next. And the sheet pile and the pond provides critical water storage. If it was allowed to fail, flooding would result. The sheet pile also allows the pond to bounce, so it can rapidly increase or decrease in water level instead of the entire system around it doing that. It also holds water and allows sediment to settle out and be removed. As the water exits Lambert Creek and flows onto East Vadnais Lake, it is in a cleaner state because of the pond. So reinforcing the pond and taking care of it was a really important priority for us. And this location at the pond is also very important for us because an access area was built as part of the project in 2004 that allows easy access to the site for future removal of sediment from the pond. We know that over time, sediment is going to build up there, and this is a place that we can access for continued maintenance very easily. So as we were looking at the site, we knew we needed to work on Sheetpile. We also wanted to look at the system in a more thorough way. So we began thinking about ideas for what a meander would look like. Meander puts the natural shape of a stream back into an area that had been ditched previously, that is ditched currently. So we started by doing site visits with engineers. We also had drone flights that were flown both in the winter time and with SEH using thermal imaging to look at possible areas where groundwater might be upwelling in this system. If we had areas where groundwater was coming to the surface, that could affect success of the meanders, so we'd want to be able to avoid those areas. And the drone work at the site was able to allow us to rule out that we don't have any groundwater upwelling areas that would cause a problem to the current design. We also looked at habitat dynamics, and we consulted closely with DNR to do that. SEH conducted research to compare with similar streams in the area to inform what a natural shape should be like in this system that would allow connection to the floodplain that we'll talk about more in just a little bit. And we conducted remote camera research on site to help us understand the habitat value, what animals out there are already using this site, and how can we help to serve them as we're working on this to make higher quality habitat for them. We did all of this with very careful consultation with our agencies, including DNR and the Army Corps of Engineers. The project in 2004 had permits with both of those entities in place, and we are amending those permits as we go forward on this project. So all of that work that was done earlier, including securing the easements, the permitting work, the building of the pond, and the ditch lines that occurred, all helps to inform and support this project that is currently happening. So we're modifying a system, and we're able to really use the work that was done before. These are some results from the remote cameras. It's always fun to see some of the wildlife at the site. We have a lot of common species that are using the area, including wild turkeys, deer, raccoons, coyotes. We also have a little bit more rare species. And Nick, if you click one more time, we'll get a circle, and you can see the river otter here. There's a latrine site right at the pond, and otters use this area quite a lot. So that's a species that's been of interest to DNR and to us. Other species in the area, we have a federally listed species, which is the rusty-patched bumblebee, that isn't found at this site, but is found in our watershed. So we've been looking at adding flowering plants to the system when we get to the revegetation stage that will help to support rusty-patched bumblebees and other pollinators in the area. We also have Blanding's turtles, again, not found at the site, but found in a lot of wetlands in our area. So the species of concern that are present in and around this area have helped to inform the plans for the vegetation work that will follow in the spring, following construction in the winter. The major contributions of the meander are to capture sediment as it's moving along in that twisting and turning kind of pathway, and to reconnect to the floodplain. More interaction with the floodplain makes for a healthier system. So that's one of our goals with this project. We've had a lot of concern from residents, and we want to make sure that you know that in the design and the planning and our consultation with agencies and other entities, that this plan does not increase flood risks to properties, and the engineers will both talk about this also and explain that more in the designs. But it does allow sediment deposition along the meander, and that can help protect downstream infrastructure like Oak Creek Drive that Jesse talked about as we were getting started tonight. It also protects habitat quality and ecosystem function, and the cost is at just about $300,000, and that is provided through grant and cash match. The cash match was part of the grant program, and this grant program is administered by MPCA, also with consultation, the funds coming from EPA. So here you can see the full site and the design, and Emily and Jeremy will talk about this more also, but it's a chance for you to see the full project laid out here, where you can see where the sheet pile is going to go, where the existing vinyl sheet pile is now, where the steel sheet pile will go, and the path of the meander as it winds through those two ditch lines. The third component of this project is biochar. Biochar, you can see in the photo at the top in somebody's hand. It is an organic material that is very similar to charcoal. It's produced at a high consistent heat in a kiln. And in that high temperature, it creates a lot of surface area. That large surface area in this material allows it to grab on or catch bacteria and nutrients as it's moving through. And biochar is being used by a lot of watersheds around the nation. It's also being used in the metro area, often in conjunction with iron-enhanced sand filters. A couple of examples are the Coon Creek Watershed District and Shingle Creek that are both using biochar in their filters. We're working closely with the University of Minnesota scientists on this, including the Twin Cities campus and the Duluth campus. In Duluth, the lab at NRRI is creating the biochar. They have a kiln at their lab where they're able to make it, and they're also doing lab tests to help identify the best composition for Lambert Creek itself. As they're going to be starting their lab experiments in June, and as they continue working on their lab experiments, they will be providing samples to the Twin Cities campus where they're building prototypes that we'll be testing out on site yet this summer. So as I mentioned earlier, the impairment on Lambert Creek is for bacteria. So that's really important for MPCA and for us to work on removing that impairment. And that's an overarching goal for VLAWMO and for MPCA to work on delisting the creek. Leading into the work that we're doing now was a 4-year bacteria study that was done with Burns and McDonnell. That study was completed in 2017, but it looked at different locations along the creek and the levels of bacteria. It also looked during dry weather and wet weather conditions to identify when are the levels of bacteria highest in the creek. And that is going to inform what we're working to remove as we look at adding these biochar treatment cells into Lambert Pond. The locations for the bacteria study are at locations where we have flumes that have been constructed. A flume has known dimensions to it, and so that improves the accuracy for sampling. We have automated samplers that are running now at these locations, and you can see them live. They're running all the time, and they report real time to www.monitormywatershed.org. So you can see what's been happening in the past. You can watch as we continue through the future and we work on construction and the other side of this project. You can also download data from the past. So if you don't get to check it out for a little while, you can check it out later. You can see everything that's been recorded there. There are 4 automated units that are running. They are collecting data on the creek real time and collecting it for us. So we'll be able to look at pre and post. What are the results of this project? So these 3 components together are really a combined package. They allow us to take a very thorough and comprehensive approach to water quality management here with the sheet pile replacement, the Meander construction, and the biochar treatment cells all working together to provide flood protection and to improve the quality of the environment. This is a package that enhances the resilience to an otherwise straightened and overtaxed system. When we look at the wetland quality out there right now, we see only a few species. We see a lot of cattails and a lot of these tall grass, which is Phragmites. We have native Phragmites out there, but it's very dense. We only have a few species because we're getting a lot of nutrients into those wetlands and they can't function like they're intended. This will help with that function as we continue with this project and other projects over time. And the end recipients are all of the residents living in the area and the people who receive St. Paul drinking water, because this is going to be cleaning up the creek water as it's flowing into East Vadnais Lake. And all of this is done at a location where critical maintenance for flood control was urgently needed. So we took a location where we knew we needed to do work, and we asked how we could build a comprehensive project to address a lot of needs all at the same time. With that, I'd like to welcome Emily Jennings and Jeremy Walgrave. They're the engineers who are designing the project, and we're delighted to be working with them, and we're also really happy to have them here talking with us tonight.
Good evening, everyone. So like Nick and Don have introduced us, but my name is Emily Jennings, and I'm a water resources engineer with SEH. And I'm also supported by Jeremy Walgrave, who's a senior water resources engineer with SEH. And we're going to talk through a snapshot of the engineering of this project. So we're just going to kick this section off with the title page of our plan sheet. So the point of this is just to share that we're at about a 90% design, which includes 90% plans. And over the next couple months, we do expect that this will evolve into 100% plans, which will include construction documents. So next slide, please. So like you saw earlier, we did a resistivity study, and these are the results. And what this resistivity is essentially a measure of soil density. And that allows us to identify where the organic soils are and where more granular soils are at the site. So we know how deep to drive the sheet pile. And there's a thick black line on this colorful graph. And what that indicates is the approximate bottom of peat underneath the proposed sheet pile area. Next slide, please. And so that is how we came up with our sheet pile design. So what you see here on this plan sheet, the box outlined in yellow, is actually a cross-section of the future sheet pile alignment. And as you can see, there's variable depth out there. The dashed line you see in the middle of that box is similar to that black line from the previous image. So our sheet pile has to go beyond the bottom of the organics in order to be really sturdy and stay in place, like Don had mentioned. But we were really able to optimize the amount of material needed based on those resistivity results. The sheet pile alignment, which you can see in the top part of this slide, it will follow the existing vinyl sheet pile alignment along the north side of the pond. And the new steel sheet pile really is an investment into the future of the Lambert Lake Pond. It provides continued integrity for that pond to be able to settle out any sediment or other pollutants that might enter in, but it also is added flood risk protection. The drainage area that comes to the Lambert Lake area is from the interstate, and it also has a handful of commercial and other residential properties. So those have a certain type of pollutant loading associated with them. So the pond here is really part of this meander system. It's really like a pre-treatment to the downstream wetland and the meander. So it all really does work together as one system, and the pond is a very valuable part of that. Next slide, please. So before I hop right into the meander design, I did want to make a mention that there are several authorities and agencies that were involved in this project. So in addition to the Watershed District, who is also the LGU for the Wetland Conservation Act, the city themselves have an MS4 stormwater permit, so there are considerations there. The Lambert Lake area is a DNR public water, and the entire project exists beneath the ordinary high water level of that public water. It's also water of the U.S., therefore the Army Corps of Engineers was involved, as we will be applying for a nationwide permit from them. And then the area does also happen to be a floodplain for the Federal Emergency Management Agency flood insurance program. So there are considerations made for FEMA. Our design was really influenced by all these different requirements, but the big takeaway here is that the project will follow all the regulatory requirements, and it has to in order to achieve, obtain authorization by those permits. Next slide, please. Thank you. So now we kind of move into the meander. So in addition to the regulatory agencies and other stakeholders, the site's hydrology and hydraulics also played a huge role into the meander design. We use the DNR stream channel design criteria because to establish this natural channel, but it really had to fit the drainage area and the wetland characteristics. So all those things kind of mended together. We were able to come up with this functional design to work for the goals in mind. So you can see on the right side of your screen here, there's a small dash line. I'm going to add an arrow pointing at it there. There we go. So that is, if we were to take a slice through the meander, what we would see is this cross-section view here on the left side of the slide. And this would be what the channel would look like if there were no water in it. And the point of this design is that this meander channel is supposed to interact with the floodplain. We expect that the water will exceed this and move its way through the wetland. And the purpose of that is we get a great water quality component, but there's also quite a bit of flow attenuation that will occur. And just an overall, as Don mentioned, healthy wetland area. I think we can move on to the next slide, Nick. So I did want to stop and discuss the floodplain for a moment. As I had mentioned, this is a FEMA floodplain. And the floodplain is really also part of this system. As I mentioned, the meander is designed to interact with this. However, we take one step back here. So the floodplain, for those who aren't aware, is administered locally at the Minnesota state level by the DNR, but it is mandated by the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA. And what this represents is a 100-year storm inundation. And what a 100-year storm means that there's 1% chance of this event happening in any given year. So you can see this floodplain area here. It is a zone AE, and what that means is a still water flooding, or I shouldn't say, it's a still water event. So Lambert Lake, you know, in instances of a large rain event, would function more like a lake. You would see water within that area. That's expected and it's natural. So as I mentioned, it's a part of our system. Earlier, I had shown a smaller dotted line of a cross-section of our design meander. However, we really did take the floodplain into consideration as well. And an important reassurance that we wanted to highlight is that any work in a floodplain requires a no-rise certificate. And a no-rise certificate requires that there's no increase in flood elevation. So we wanted to point out that this project will not cause any changes outside of the project limits. There will be no change to water elevations within the area. And lastly, we just wanted to highlight another project that was completed by SEH, just to give an idea of what this could look like when it's finished. This is a slightly different project in that this was a less natural channel. What you see here is a concrete line, or it was a stone line channel, but it used to be a concrete line channel. It's in a much more urban setting, and there were meanders used in this project to also have greater interaction with the floodplain for some improved water quality of the area. So although the Lambert Lake project will be slightly different, it's just a good picture of what's to come for this project.
Back to Dawn for a moment.
We thought you might be wondering what's coming up for our next steps. So we wanted to provide that as we near the end of our presentation. We are working on permitting right now with SEH, and we anticipate that that will be completed this summer. There will be additional opportunities for you to comment if you would like to be part of our June 24th and August 26th board meetings. Those will be publicized on our website, and we certainly invite you to attend. We'd like to hear from you. We will be continuing to plan, and we hope to request construction bids by late summer. Erosion control measures will be put in place starting this fall and winter, and we're looking at winter construction with vegetation restoration following in the spring. We have a number of resources that we'd like to make available to you. The Star Tribune did a really great article on the 10th of May about the value of natural curves in streams, and especially highlighted some projects in Rice Creek where similar projects have been done. The EQB monitor was just published this week, and it has the environmental assessment worksheet for Lambert Lake. That opens our comment period. It opened on May 19th and will run through June 17th. The EAW itself is also available on our website. You can find it right from the homepage, and we would certainly appreciate your comments on that. And we've been posting monthly updates on our website about this project specifically, so you can always check in to see where we're at with those.
Well, yes, thanks everybody. For the connected vision, like Jesse said earlier, water falling on every yard or driveway, street, even when water is on turf grass, some of that water is getting shed off the surface. So as it collects and it's coming downstream, every property is actually an opportunity. So we invite you to be a part of this process. We have a cost share program. Most residents work under the landscape level 1 cost share. So we do projects like restoring stream banks. We plant wet areas with native plants. We do projects to support storage on the landscape. And that can look like a rain garden, like what we have here in Vadnais Heights. Certain native plants designed for certain areas. And here's a picture of a shoreline restoration. So that's available at VLAWMO.org/grants. We have a staff member who will come and visit on site, talk with you, hear the story of your property, and try to work with your needs and your interests. And every project is unique, so we really care about how we work with our residents, work with the community. Sometimes that's private residents, but also neighborhood associations as well, or businesses. So with that, oh, and I should also mention all of those visits, we're definitely accommodating for social distancing. So our staff will be in the field. If we're on site at a property, we're making a way to work with social distancing. Lastly, as Education Outreach Coordinator, I facilitate the volunteering with VLAWMO. We have a number of opportunities to be involved. If you're interested in the watershed or just joining us, it's also a great way to learn more, be involved in the community. We're doing a monitoring project in Lambert Creek in conjunction with those flume sites that Don mentioned. So as we do those live monitoring flume sites, we're also biomonitoring what's living in the creek. So that's what insects, what kind of little critters are showing up, and what can that tell us about the water quality and the sediment that's accruing. We have Adopt a Drain, which is a fun, easy program. It's outside of VLAWMO. It's adoptadrain.org, and more information on that is on our website under residents. But it's just an easy way to clean out storm drains and track the amount of debris that's removed from local water bodies because of that direct connection that drains have. And they track it all over the metro, and it's pretty exciting to see those results. There's Adopt a Rain Garden, because projects like this down in the bottom left screen are connected to a neighborhood association. When the project is on public property, we have residents who chip in and help out, and we try to keep those maintained, looking great, and functioning well. So that's an opportunity. And lastly, we have a citizen advisory committee. Twice a year we meet and we talk about VLAWMO's education outreach, the things that we're trying to, the ways that we reach residents and community members. It's a way for us to work together. It's really connecting mostly with me and my outreach efforts, and helps it be relevant. I take feedback at those meetings, and we really try to just improve. You know, it's a place to maximize and reflect and improve what we're doing for the public. All of that is under vlamo.org/get-involved. Okay, and with that, we want to move to the questions before. Here we go from Cheryl. How big of a storm would this project handle? Thanks, Cheryl. Anyone want to chime in there?
I can chime in. So the Meander itself is designed to be anywhere from around a 2-year event, and that's the DNR design criteria. And what a 2-year event is, those are more frequent events, things that you see happening. I think that it's a 50% probability in any given year. But the floodplain itself, what you saw there was a 100-year event. So everything in between would fall in between those boundaries. It's not to say that the wetland area itself couldn't handle a larger event. Those are just the design pieces that are mapped. Cheryl, if you wanted any additional information, please keep going with your questions.
Yeah. Great. So here's one. How will this slow the water flow upstream?
This will not flow the water upstream of the project area.
Okay.
That water should be expected to act as it is now. Within the project area, the water will be slowed down slightly because the channel length is actually getting longer. Therefore, we have a flatter slope.
Oh. for that.
Nick, it looks like someone else is asking a question, but they're on mute.
Okay. Do you see which name? I could temporarily unmute somebody.
Oh, looks like I did. I unmuted her.
Oh, I'm not.
Hi, this is Tina Rosenquist. Are you hearing me?
Yep, we hear you, Tina.
Great. In regards to a letter that I had given to Nick, regarding the Lambert Creek, we are been in contact with Mark for the last 5 years. We were not made aware of any of these issues that you are presently presenting. But we have no assurance that this won't hold our water longer because we are on Oak Crest Drive. We've been holding water now for the last 5 years, which has come up into our yard and killed our trees. And this is a concern that we have had for the last 5 years. So how will this affect us? And why don't we start from the higher upper part of the stream and then go down to your area?
Thanks for that. Good question.
Please advise.
Yep, I'll refer
So,
to anyone who wants
Nick,
to take
it
that.
looks like Dawn has dropped off. Oh, she's just getting back in here.
Yeah, she
Um,
might have had
I think
some issues.
that would be a great question for Dawn as soon as she gets back in the meeting. But what I can add is that that is outside of the project area. And I think maybe Dawn can talk more about the process, but we should maybe give her a minute to get reconnected.
Yeah, and we'll catch back up and see if she heard the question. Don, are you logged on?
Hi,
Okay,
I'm back.
there we go.
Sorry, I totally lost my connection and I missed 3 minutes of that.
Oh, wow, that's quite a bit. So,
Yeah, right
yeah.
at the end.
Can
The
you reiterate
question
it?
was of a property off of Oak Crest Drive, which is north of County Road F off the branch ditch. And they expressed that they had some concerns on their property that they previously spoke to, I believe, when Mark would be Mark Graham, former city engineer. And they're kind of wondering why their portion was not included with the project.
I think for size on this project, we didn't have access to properties north of County Road F, and we're focusing on the area that is delineated by the project right now because of cost constraints and really needing to focus on the sheet pile first. So we wanted to be able to work all within that construction area to begin with, but we're not like turning a blind eye to the rest of the creek. We want to continue working on other areas of the creek and be strategic also working with the city of Vadnais Heights as we continue to identify project areas in the future. There have been some areas that have been cleaned out along the creek, and that's something that doesn't have to wait for a major project to happen. And we'd like to continue looking for those kinds of opportunities also. That was done a couple of years ago by VLAWMO, and the city has continued to do some of those efforts to get brush and fallen trees out of the creek, which really prohibits flow. So we want to continue doing that kind of work while we look for our next big project. Does that help?
Yeah, and I want to give an opportunity. Was that covered, Tina? Do you think, was there anything else that we missed?
Yes, when we addressed this with Mark Graham 5 years ago, we were not made aware of this project. And our concern has been going on for the last 5 years. And that was our own issue with our own dead trees. And this still have holding water in our backyard. And we would like to address this because once you get your project completed, we would be an afterthought. And then it would take too much money to see the water flow from our area to go into your water flow because we are north of County Road F. We've gone to meetings, we've addressed this with Mark Graham, and we never resolved anything at this point. And now that we were made aware of this through the paper, we want to be represented in the sense of, we've been here since 1978.
I'd like to respond.
And real quick, Jesse, we're at 7 o'clock, so definitely have a quick response. We won't have time to finish much. There's a few more general questions, so I'll do one more general question after this one, but things about particular locations, particular properties, definitely we want to talk about them with each individual. So, okay, go ahead, Jesse.
Just a real quick response. So I believe that's branch 3 that serves that portion of the property. And I just want to introduce myself. I'm Jesse. I still talk to Mark Graham about once a month, and he's told me 100 things about the city, but he's got about 1,000 more to go. So I'm catching up here. I'd like to extend an invitation. I'd like to meet with you at your property. So if you could email me, you could find my email address at our web, or if you just use Google and type City Engineer Vadnais Heights, that's the easiest way to get my email address. Email me your address and phone number, and let's meet in your backyard, and we could talk about when we're going to eventually address branch 3. But this project will help these problems slightly, because this is the receiving ditch for branch 3. So any improvements downstream are going to help you. But you're not going to see big improvements until we get in there and do a bigger project. The Vadnais Heights City Council has let me spend about $200,000 so far this year alone in these types of projects. But we got a lot more work to do, and that branch is on my radar. So please contact me. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jesse. I'll close off with one more question. The next one was from Patricia Euchre. These other questions definitely want to get to. I will save this chat feature, and we will get these questions up on our frequently asked questions page, and we will remember, I have a way to get your email address so that we'll get back to you directly. So with that, last question is, will the meander cause larger bounce upstream?
No, the meander will not change any conditions outside of the project limits.
Great. Okay. So sounds like that one's pretty concise. Yeah. Thank you so much, everybody. My last note is that here's my note in the chat bar, is that on our Facebook page, we're going to have a series called Floodplain Friday. We'll list links, resources, examples from other places around the country, solving these dilemmas with climate change, high water, floodplains, how to manage water. And we invite you to participate. Of course, you know, that's an ongoing place to follow what we're doing with other projects, but it's a way to be involved, be in the loop. So at VLAWMO for our Facebook page, and we encourage you to join in. So thank you so much, all the presenters, and thanks for your time, everybody. Thanks for sticking around a few minutes after. And we're excited to continue and to keep growing and keep communicating. So with that, have a great night.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.